How's it going today? That was unenthusiastic. It's good to see each and every one of you in this space. It's good to see a little bit of sunshine. You know, last year, the sermon series that we did during Lent was essentially only good things grow in the dark. And this year, had we went with a theme like that, it wouldn't have worked. Because one day it's dark, and one day it's light, and one day it's spring, and one day it's winter, and it just doesn't know what it wants to do, right? But it's good to be in this space on what I affectionately like to call Diet Easter. Palm Sunday. It's a beautiful day. And we made a triumphant entry into this place in various stages of our life and various stages of our faith journey, but yet nearly every person in this space journeyed all the way up to the front, and they laid whatever they had at the altar. And today it happened to be a palm. Tomorrow it might be your heart, your spirit. That's the invitation, to come in this space and lay down whatever you have, and that might be good enough for God. I need you to know that it is good enough for God, and you are good enough for God. Would you be in a spirit of prayer with me? Oh, giving and gracious God, we thank you so much for that mercy that holds us, that renews the spirit inside, for the hope that dwells in the hearts of your beloved, that we might be transformed and renewed, that we might be reminded of the greatness and the glory that dwells within, that your light might shine even in the darkest corners of our spirits, and that we might have the courage to put one foot in front of the other, rejoicing in all that is good and all that is holy. May you be in the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart, that we might be your hands and feet, that we might be your hope and love for all of the days ahead. And the people of God proclaim together. You know, there's a reason that we don't enter this life with a timer attached to us. Wouldn't be very good to have a timer on your wrist that counted down the seconds until you were to ultimately leave this earth. It'd be a little demoralizing. You step into the world as a screaming, crying little baby, and the first thing that your parents lay eyes on, not whether you're a girl or a boy, but how much time does this baby have left? And the closer that clock would wind to zero, the more anxious we would become, right? Just naturally. That we would stare at this clock as though it could somehow slow time. And the truth is, the more obsessed we become with time, how little, how much, well, the less we actually appreciate that time. There's something in the unknowing that actually pushes us forward in life. It pushes us to do the reaching and the striving because we don't know when that time is going to run out. And yet, in this experience with Jesus, he did know. And on the surface, when we look at Jesus, we look at his travels and his journeys, we don't see the struggle that we might struggle with. There is most certainly tension. There's a little bit of anxiety, and there's this definite sense of apprehension on Jesus' part. But there's never this sprint that we would anticipate to cram all of the events of a life into just those final moments. You know, if this was depicted in a movie, we would surely expect him to say at least once during the course of the film, "We must hurry. We don't have much time left." We'd expect it. But that doesn't happen, right? He takes the long way to Jerusalem. He doesn't take the shortcut. He takes the long way, and he enjoys the stops along the way, and he lets love be lavished over him, and he's not afraid to lavish others with love. He eats and he drinks, and he allows Mary to anoint him. He spends time teaching and praying. He spends time correcting at the temple, and he even takes an entire day just to rest, just to recover his spirit. And these are not the actions of a man that's staring at his clock and waiting for the seconds to tick down. And yet, he was. And I wonder how many of us have wasted so much time worrying about things that we can't control, focused on outcomes that we can't change, all the while terrified of this clock that we can't see. And our fear of this earthly end is all wrapped in this question that we ponder: did I do enough? Internally, raise your hand if you've ever questioned that. I see it in your eyes. You have, absolutely. But my friends, the answer to that question isn't what you've been looking for. Because the truth is, it doesn't matter, because Jesus did. Our broken and fragile spirits keep us from acknowledging the truth in our salvation, that you are worth it. The work, the recovery, the healing that's necessary, the reconciliation from that brokenness, all of it, you're worth it because God says that you are. Our sermon series this Lent, it tackles this reality that we can't wade through waters with these broken vessels, with holes all through the hull of our ships. And like it or not, we're not prepared. The raging waters of this world with its political climate and its social climate and the economic climate, it's made us worse for wear on this journey. And if we attempt to tackle the great struggles of life without first doing the repairing and restoring necessary, we won't make it on the journey. Our scripture today is a popular scripture on this journey to Jerusalem and ultimately the cross from Luke, chapter 19. After saying these things, Jesus headed straight up to Jerusalem. When he got near Bethphage and Bethany at the mountain called Olives, he sent two of the disciples with instructions. Go to the village across from you, and as soon as you enter, you'll find a colt tethered, one that's never, ever been ridden. Untie it and bring it. And if anyone says anything, ask, what are you doing? Say, his master needs him. And so the two left, and they found it just as he said. And as they were untying the colt, the owner said, what are you untying that colt for? And they said, his master needs him. And they brought the colt to Jesus. And throwing their coats on its back, they helped Jesus get on. And as he rode, the people gave him a grand welcome, and they began to throw their coats, one after another, in the street. And right at the crest, where the Mount of Olives began its descent, the whole crowd of disciples burst into enthusiastic praise over all the mighty works that they'd witnessed. And they said, blessed is he who comes, the King, in God's name. All is well in heaven. Glory in all the high places. And some Pharisees from the crowd told him, teacher, get your disciples under control. But he said, if they keep quiet, the stones would do it for them, shouting praise. We find this triumphant entry of Jesus. And I don't know about you, but it just gives this like warm, cozy feeling. We think about being in the crowd at that celebration and watching Jesus make his way into Jerusalem. It just gives us all the feels, this celebration. And it feels almost uplifting. And this is the reason why I call Palm Sunday Diet Easter. The truth is, it's got all the party, right, but none of the consequences. Diet Easter. And it makes sense as we read the text, right? There's this beautiful acknowledgement of Jesus as king, right? Blessed is he who comes, the King, in God's name. And at that place, it's almost an invitation for God to walk before us. But I can't help but wonder, if we're not twisted in our view of this passage, even just a little bit, because there's two perspectives to witness here. Well, to some degree, there's three, right? You have the Jesus perspective, you have his disciples that are entering Jerusalem with him, and then you have the rest of the crowd, right? Three perspectives. And so what does the crowd see? What do they see when they see Jesus entering this place? When we begin to look in a historical context, we learn of this tension in Jerusalem and this place. You have this inner turmoil of who's going to run this place? Who's going to be in charge of the kingdom? Is the leader going to come from the religious side, from the Pharisees and the Sadducees, or is he going to come from a political person that rises up and takes control like an emperor? But In the midst of all of that chaos, in the midst of what we would only equate to like a 2024 Trump versus Harris, all the animosity and the tension that goes along with that, all across the board, that atmosphere, slice it right down the middle and enter Jesus. And in that space, there's light bulbs for so many people in that space that look, that Jesus guy, he can save us. Not just our souls, but he can save our city that we love so much. He can save our society and our culture. And in that space, we think like a third-party candidate could actually win, right? But in that same space, you also find people that are threatened by the idea of Jesus arriving, by the idea of all these people in the crowd that would look up to Jesus, that would ultimately have power. And there's another perspective that you see in this passage, which is this reception of these people that actually believe in Jesus. And what they believe is not just Jesus, the Son of God. They believe this is the beginning of a change in their lives. That the day-to-day that they've been struggling through is going to abruptly change because this prophet king is going to lead all of us to prosperity. And when we think about what the disciples were thinking, they thought a lot of the same things, right? Despite Jesus telling them over and over again, hey guys, you know they're going to kill me, right? They just blew it off, right? All of that talk fell on deaf ears because they weren't prepared to handle the reality. And so I imagine as they watched Jesus' reception into this place and all of this love, all of this hope that was standing in a place, they felt this sense of freedom in their spirits, that somehow this long journey was gaining the momentum that they dreamt of on this walk, that it wasn't going to be so hard anymore. They weren't going to have to struggle. And yet, we do know how the story ends, right? And it doesn't necessarily end in the victory that they were all looking for. The truth is, perspective is everything. The difference between starving and fasting is just this. And here's the truth. When we read this passage, we aren't watching a triumphant entry. We aren't watching the celebratory parade of Jesus entering the kingdom and the city as king. We're watching a funeral. We're watching a funeral procession laid out right in front of our eyes. And with that understanding, today doesn't feel much like Easter. You know, we aren't very good at giving people their flowers while they're still here. We just aren't. And some of that has to do with the way we live our lives, right? There's just too much going on. We got too many commitments, too many ways that our attention is being pulled in all these different directions that we're struggling just to stay upright, let alone communicate what we feel with all the people that we've shared these memories with. And so we hold on to these feelings and these thoughts. We hold on to it until we find some opportune time to tell this person, hey, I love you. But the truth is that time rarely ever comes. You know, my best friend's dad passed away this week. And once the initial shock begins to wear off, you're just left with all these memories and these moments to sort through. And the truth is you don't get the time that you'd like to have to sort through those memories. You don't get the time to process it all because life just keeps lifing, right? And you know, he was always my dad's right-hand man on the basketball court. He was always his assistant coach. And they worked in tandem, right? They had this rule that they would do the hard coaching for each other of their sons. So he would coach me and my dad would coach his son, and they'd have those hard moments. And so Gus would coach me, and if I made a mistake or I got frustrated or I began to play poorly, he wouldn't scold. He wouldn't criticize, he wouldn't yell, he would just put his hand on my shoulder and he'd just say, we need you, Mike. We need you. And that's all it would take to wake me up again, energized and refocused. And no, my friends, we don't get the opportunity to celebrate people the way that we ought to until it's too late. Until those moments have already gone, until you're left holding memories instead of sharing them. But I do believe, earnestly in my heart, that Jesus understood this. And I know this in the way that he spent those last moments of his life. He wasn't concerned with checking things off of his bucket list. He wasn't concerned with making sure that he got to see all of the sights. He was just concerned about his people. And did they know how much he loved them? Did they know how much he valued them? Were they prepared for all that was to come? And he expressed and expended his love, and in that same way, he allowed love to wash over him. Because at the end of the day, you don't get to take it with you. You don't. You never see a U-Haul behind a hearse, do you? All of the memories, those last a lifetime, those moments where someone could have destroyed you, but instead planted life within you. Those moments, they matter more than we ever could realize. And as we sit here and we celebrate the Jesus that walks before us, we fully embrace, and I mean fully embrace what's to come. The suffering, the betrayal, the pain, and ultimately the death. But we can do so because we have faith. This bold and unadulterated faith, because we know that at the end of the day, at the end of your story, at the end of Jesus' story, at the end of my story, love is the thing that wins. And so as we ponder our own mortality, I wonder if Jesus hasn't given us the answer that we've been searching for. That in death, there is much life, and in life, there is love, and in love there is and there shall always be God. And it's for that, my friends, that we give thanks from one degree of glory to the next. Thanks be to God.